Aw. Here we go. You guys ready? Let's make sure you guys completely understand contracts so that you pass this section with a high number, because this is the one people have a lot of low numbers on. So contracts. Legal essentials of a valid contract. You have to have capable parties, mutual consent, a lawful object, and consideration. You have to have all four to make it a valid contract. Capable parties, that means your client has to be over 18. Mutual consent, that's a meeting of the minds. A lawful object, you'll have a property, right? And consideration is money. So you have to have all four for a legal contract. So everybody's writing it all down. It's a long one. You must be like a speed writer.
Me? Oh.
Yes. Phew. All right, so a valid contract. So with a valid contract, they have to have all legal essentials. So if you're missing even one, it's not a valid contract. Good. Void contract. This is where everybody gets mixed up because they're void, valid. What is it? If missing even one essential, it's void. This means it was never a binding contract in the first place. So if it was never binding in the first place, it's void. You might even want to write that down, even though that's more to write than usual. It was never binding in the first place. And you'll want that in your head when we start going through void and not and voidable, because there's void and there's voidable, and that's how people get messed up.
Would you say it was never what?
It was never valid in the first place. Okay, so with that in mind, underaged party. Illegal consideration. Guys all good? Consideration. Valuable, good, sufficient, adequate.
So, I'm sorry, so the one back, so that would be illegal money?
Yeah, it could be illegal money, like stolen property.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I had one kid in class, I always meet with my clients. I mean, my students, like if a student has questions or they want me to help them with the contract or something, I'll say, send it to me. If we have to meet, we meet. And I had one kid that wanted to meet with me, and he's like, I couldn't talk about it over the phone because I want to find out how I can buy a property with this money. And he showed me a picture of a stack of money in his closet. I'm like, how much is that? And it was $13 million.
What the heck?
And so he had already been under investigation, and I'm like, but is that money legal or not? He's like, it's legal, but I haven't paid taxes on it. So because you haven't paid taxes on it, it's not legal. So that's illegal consideration. Because if he bought a house with that illegal money, then the property wouldn't be a valid contract.
Did you help him out, or?
Did I help him out? I cut ties as fast as possible. I did ask him, I'm like, how did you get so much money? He actually is in a partnership with people that have a gambling boat that's outside of the borderline or something. I don't know. I just didn't want to deal with it.
Sounds like Ozark. Yeah, sounds like Ozark.
I'm like, can I just have $1 million of that? It won't hurt you. One party or obligation substituted for another. So if one party substitutes for another party in a contract, that's called novation. Hey, we're already on the next page. So you guys are going to see this word a lot, contingency. So when you have a contingency in a contract, there has to be perimeters around it. What's the nature, the duration, and method to be removed? So like if you have an appraisal contingency, the nature of that is, yeah, you're waiting for the appraisal to come in. Well, how long is it going to be? The duration, probably 17 days. And how are you going to remove it? Well, you're going to sign it off because there's a contingency removal contract. So you just sign it off on contingency removal. Nature, duration, and method of removal. Here we go back to contracts. Contracts that do not need to be in writing. Well, all I have to say about that is put it in writing. Personal property listings or a lease for 1 year or less. Personal property listings or a lease for 1 year or less. That's a long one, huh? Party able to enter into a contract. And nobody even said it. I was waiting for one of you guys to say something about somebody who's too young to go into contract, an emancipated minor. So remember, to be emancipated, they actually have to go to court and be emancipated. They can't just say, well, I can afford the house. They actually have to be emancipated.
What if they were both 16 and they got married? Emancipated?
Well, once you're married, I believe that you're emancipated anyways. And if they're 16 and they're married, they're just crazy anyway. Love conquer all. Until the rent bill comes in. Mutual consent in a real estate contract. Offer and acceptance. You guys ready? Cloud mutual consent. So what would cloud the mutual consent? The offer and acceptance, misrepresentation, threats, or duress. Like if you're holding a gun at the head of the seller or the buyer and say, you got to buy this, that's going to compromise, right? Compromise their decision. You better buy this house or else. Okay, I promise I'll buy this one. Avoidable contract. Here we go. Binding until rescinded. Bless you. So it was a valid contract and it was binding until they rescinded it, so they're voiding it out. Voidable. Yes.
So that is voidable but not void if under duress, right?
If under duress, it's voidable, right? Under duress. Let me see. I think you're good. You're good. Don't try to confuse yourself because you're going to confuse my whole class. And we'll see the questions and answers so you guys can see it again one more time. Okay? Not illegal purpose. So they're going to say all of the following are voidable except, and it's going to say illegal purpose. Because if it was a legal purpose, it wasn't valid in the first place. Does that make sense?
So avoidable contract was originally a valid contract, but a void contract was never.
Very good.
So basically
Yes.
It's like the middleman in a sense. Like, so
You guys are way overthinking it. Stop. Ooh. This is the part where everybody messes up and then people keep talking about it, and then everybody forgets what they thought and they have second thoughts. So remember, voidable, it was binding. It was valid in the first place, but now because they're rescinding it, it's voidable. They're going to void it out. So it has to be binding in the first place. Now, an illegal purpose, it's not voidable because it wasn't valid in the first place. Got that? That's the best way to remember it. Number 15, fraud. Well, that was the illegal purpose, right? Voidable. fraud has been committed to induce the buyer into signing a contract, and it's voidable. Misrepresentation. So if you lied to them about the contract and it was valid in the first place, now they can void it out because you misrepresented it. Like I said, this is the hardest part a lot of people have problems with. Actual fraud. Intent to deceive. So you knew what you were doing, you intended to deceive, and that's actual fraud. Constructive fraud. Negligence. So you didn't know what you didn't know. How about that? That's a scary one, that you can get yourself in trouble because you didn't know what you didn't know, huh? If buyer loses ability to complete the purchase. Unenforceable. This one's a cute question because it says he wakes up in the morning and he just doesn't have the capacity, or he doesn't have the will withal. That's what it says. Poor buyer wakes up and has no will withal.
Worked retail.
I know, right? Don't make me do it. Must be in writing if not to be performed within 1 year. Statute of frauds. Oh, goody, goody, purchase contracts. Aren't you excited? I'm going to make sure you guys really understand this. Effective date. Final acceptance delivered to offer or.
What was the last one? I'm sorry, I didn't get to write the last one.
There you go, statute of frauds. You guys ready? Effective date, final acceptance delivered to offer or. So the offer or, that's the buyer, gives an offer to the seller. The seller takes a little bit of time, but they accept the offer and they sign it and they give it back to the person who gave it in the first place. So once the person who gave the offer out gets the acceptance and it's signed, that's the date that we're starting from. Because a lot of real estate agents is like, I don't know what day we take. Effective date is the date when the offer or gets it back. And it's a signed, executed contract. Final acceptance delivered to the offer or. Don't make it harder than it is.
No, but I was gonna say, so when the buyer signs and puts a date, right, and it goes to the seller.
Uh-huh.
Then the seller signs and puts a date,
Yep. And gives it to the buyer.
but doesn't give it to the buyer to the next day?
Then I guess you could discuss what day you want to go, but once you have the execute contract in your hand, that's when it starts.
So that should be when the email was sent, that day?
Yes,
right?
that day.
Mhm.
And you have a timestamp on your emails, right?
Mhm.
Because everybody like freaks out about that. Like, can we roll it over to the next day?
Yeah, exactly.
Buyer can sue seller. Ooh, I don't like that word sue. Buyer can sue seller within 4 years. So remember I said the transfer disclosure is 2 years and the purchase contract is 4 years. It was funny because when my client called me about the air conditioning and all the stuff that wasn't disclosed that we're now finding, he's like, we got to get this done. Da, da, da. I'm like, okay, I just want to let you know, take a breath. You have 4 years. And he's like, and I go, but if it was a transfer disclosure thing, I go, you have 2 years. He's like, 2 years, 4 years, I'll get it done in a couple weeks. Ay, ay, ay. Signed by only one spouse. So the purchase contract signed by only one spouse is unenforceable. So the listing contract is enforceable, but the purchase contract is not because you're involving another party. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So if you get an offer back to you and only one spouse signs it, you really need to wait for the other spouse to agree. And, again, you have to realize the test was written and a lot of the questions are old. So with DocuSign, everybody's going to be able to sign. I don't care where you are. Like my husband was in New York when we sold our property in Victorville. He was able to sign it through electronic signature. But signed by only one spouse, purchase contract is unenforceable. Purchase contract. Oh, we already talked about as is, didn't we? As is, seller not willing to make repairs. Means seller. That's a long one, huh? It's all good. People are still writing, so I'm waiting.
I always think of that movie, The Money Pit.
The Money Pit was a good movie. There's a lot of good movies out there that have to do
I
with.
see as is and just all the problems.
There's a couple of Money Pit kinds of movie, but the one called The Money Pit, that was. Includes observable conditions only. So remember I told you, observable things only. So if I can't see it and it doesn't work, I'm not accepting it. Does that make sense? Because I don't even know about it. So I think I mentioned to you guys, while you're still writing, that once a seller signs a contract, they're selling their house. This is true. So with that said, seller backs out. Buyer sues for specific performance. The broker's not going to sue for specific, I can't say it, I can't say it now. I can't say it. How come? Specific performance. God, that's one. So I think I told you guys the other day, yesterday, that my client, one of my students called me and said, my dad wants to back out. And I said, is there a sales contract already signed? Yeah, they're in escrow. Well, he's not backing out. He's like, is there any way out? And I said, if the buyer doesn't get a loan, yeah, there's a way out. Because if the buyer doesn't do something, but right now, your dad's selling his house. I did a nice video on that one.
But it's easier on the other way out.
Almost every buyer can get out. Because you have contingencies, and as long as it's one of the contingencies, then you can get out. But like did I tell you guys about the person who tried to get out of escrow without doing anything, and they lost 130 grand?
Because they had no reason, they just wanted to get out.
Yeah, they just
So
wanted to
it
get out of the
wasn't
contract. Yeah,
Can you put back one? I'm sorry.
Oh, because they put in 2 offers in.
they put 2 offers in. Yeah, somebody was paying attention. You guys, anything that comes out of my mouth could possibly be on your test.
Thank you.
On owner occupied liquidated damages cannot generally exceed 3% of the purchase price. We're on page 57.
Yeah, I apologize.
It's okay, don't worry.
My pressure on my air tire came on, so I went to go put it, and the thing was corroded, it snapped in half, all the air went out of my tire. So I was
No.
in a tow truck, I was at the tire shop.
Oh, don't worry, I'll give you this.
It's okay, but I learned something from you. I kept hearing you say problems happen all the time.
They do.
And I kept hearing that voice.
Good.
And I was stressed out. I'm like, it happened all
No,
the
don't
time.
stress out, yeah. Things happen that you can't, you made it, you got it.
I
Do you live
apologize to
do you live far away?
LA, so I was stressed out. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta get back there by 4. I'm like, oh. And I'm
You
like,
know, no, you'll be fine.
things happen all the time.
If it didn't, we would be bored with life, right?
And I left your phone number here.
Don't worry about it. Purchase contracts on page 57. Receive copy of signed purchase contract at the time of signing. So when you guys sign a document with your clients, you really need to give them a copy immediately. Especially nowadays with DocuSign, they'll sign everything as soon as the document's completely executed. They'll get a copy via email. So make sure your clients get a copy of everything. Everybody good? I think I videotaped a lot of it too. Purchase contract contains time is of the essence. So they're going to ask you, literally, that's a question, which contract contains the words time is of the essence? The answer, purchase contract. Contingency removals. In purchase contract. So in a normal market, when we're not removing all the contingencies, because some real estate agents right now are going in with offers with no contingencies. And let me tell you, the real estate attorneys are saying, don't do this. You want to see an appraisal. And the contingency removal clause is in the purchase contract. Counteroffer. Rejection of original offer. So remember that when the buyer gives an offer to the seller, if the seller counter offers the buyer, that's a rejection of the offer.
And does the clock start over?
There's not really a clock going when you're,
Okay, because they haven't accepted yet.
because they haven't accepted it yet. So when you give an offer to somebody, normally you give them 3 days to respond to you. And if they don't respond within 3 days, that's when you're going to start bugging them. But if they don't respond in 3 days, then it pretty much takes your offer and cancels it out. Multiple offers. This is happening now. People are getting more than one offer. Must be disclosed.
So if you accept another offer, you need to disclose that you're going to have one.
Well, what happens on a multiple offer, which I wish people would have taught me because nobody taught me this. When somebody has multiple offers, if you give an offer to somebody and they have multiple offers, they're supposed to counter you back with a multiple offer counter form. So the multiple offer counter form is different than the counter offer form because at the bottom of the multiple offer form, it says the seller has to sign it one more time. So like you give an offer and then the seller gives a bunch of multiple offers out. Okay, yours is not accepted until you get the bottom signature from the seller. So it's kind of, so make sure you're aware of that when you're going back and forth with somebody. Usually when they have a bunch of offers, they do this horrible thing called highest and best. And you have to go back to your client and say, okay, they want the highest and best. You might even be the highest, but you may not know. Listings. This is a part you guys really, really got to know. Bilateral employment contract. They're hiring you. So there's two people. The seller is hiring you to list their home and sell it. That's your job. You've been employed. So when you're done and you sell the house, you're unemployed. Competent parties. So when you take the listing, hopefully you can realize that the seller is competent. Everybody got it? Mm-hmm. I see some pens still going. I'm waiting. I see a hand up. I'm waiting even longer. Go ahead.
If the seller rejects the original offer, is that offer not valid anymore?
If the seller did what to the original offer?
Rejects?
If the seller rejects it, sellers don't normally reject. Okay, first of all, you shouldn't have a seller reject. If you guys are paying attention to your sellers and they go, you know what, they're just all pissy and they don't like the offer at all. They go, I don't like that offer at all. I'm not even going to counter. Okay, they shouldn't reject it. They should at least counter them because when are you going to get your next offer? You know, it sounds really stupid and it's kind of a cliche in real estate, but the cliche is always, sometimes the best offer is the first offer. Because sometimes you'll get that first offer and the seller will be like, well, we got that offer so fast, we might get a better offer. And then they reject it and then they don't get another offer for a long time, or then all the rest of the offers are really low. So I would highly suggest not to reject an offer right off the bat. At least counter it, do something. But remember that counter offering it is a rejection of their offer in the first place. Okay? Hope I got your answer on that. All right, commission clause. Must be, this is cute, because somebody must have wrote the commission on their contract really tiny so the seller couldn't see it. Because it has to be in 10-point font and it must be in bold print.
Oh, gosh.
So this is my commission to the world. Guys all good? I see writing still. Number 36. Salesperson leaves broker. Aw, that's not very nice. If the salesperson leaves the broker while there's a listing, we already talked about this.
Goes to the broker.
It goes to the broker. And it's interesting because I teach this all the time, but until I saw it in real life, I'm like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Because the seller is connected to the sales agent. They probably have never even met the broker, but because you as the salesperson took that listing while you were under that broker, the broker still gets to keep it. So I think I said it yesterday when I saw it happen. We negotiated with the old broker to go ahead and let him still get his part so that the seller and the agent could still have that relationship and get the property sold.
Because the salesperson, agent, right?
Uh-huh.
Cannot take it then?
Nope, you can't take
So
it.
has to tell the client.
You have to tell your client, well, I'm leaving my real estate office, so my broker will be in contact with you.
Unless you negotiate with the broker.
Unless you negotiate with the broker. Most people don't negotiate with the broker. The broker just takes it and says, see ya. But I didn't want to do that because I'm a nice broker.
But usually when you leave, if you're going to another office,
Uh-huh.
they're paying you for that listing.
They'll what?
They'll pay you the commission that you would have earned.
Oh yeah, they're going to pay you your commission anyways. They're not just going to not pay you unless in California sometimes they'll assign it to another agent. Listing signed by only one spouse. So a listing that's signed by only one spouse is actually enforceable.
Yeah.
Yes.
What if listing expires?
If the listing expires, then you can go ahead and go to your other broker and not worry about it. You guys should never let a listing expire. You should always make sure that you talk to your sellers before it expires. Exclusive listings. Here we go. Must have a defined termination date. So you have a beginning point and an ending point on your exclusive listing. I'm listing your home for 3 months, so I'm listing it from this point to this point. There's always a beginning and an ending date. Examples of a defined termination date would be 90 days from signing. Now we're getting to money, huh, guys? Dun, 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 dun. Exclusive agency listing. If it has the word, you might want to circle that word agency. If it has that word in there, agency, that means if you sell the property, you're going to get paid. But if the owner sells the property, you're not getting paid. No commission owed if the owner sells the property. So people go, well, how could that happen? Super easy. What basically could happen is this. Let's say that you get a listing and you put the sign up, you put it on the MLS, you do everything, you get ready to get that house sold, and the sign goes up, and then this couple's driving around the neighborhood. And your owner is outside watering the yard, and the sign's up, and the couple goes, oh my gosh, honey, stop the car. And they stop the car. That's a famous saying, you guys. You're supposed to laugh. Honey, stop the car. So they stop the car, they get out, and they see the seller watering his grass, and they go, we've been looking in this neighborhood forever, and we've never seen a house for sale. Can we see your home? And the seller shuts off the water and says, yeah, come on in, shows him around the house, sells the house to him. Guess what? Bless you. He just sold the house to him. He calls you and says, guess what? I just sold my house. I don't need you no more.
But what about all the paperwork?
Oh, well, exclusive agency listing says if the seller sells the house, you get not paid. You don't get paid. End of story for the test.
Different story.
Because, yeah, somebody's going to have to figure out the paperwork, huh?
So you don't want
In my opinion, I would negotiate and say, okay, well, if you sell it, do you need to do all the paperwork? Because you're probably going to need some help. Exclusive right to sell. This is the one you want. The exclusive right to sell, the property sells, and you get paid. How about that? This is the one that most people do. We ready? Multiple brokers. Oh, that doesn't even sound good.
multiple bosses?
Open listing is multiple brokers, only procuring cause gets paid. So what they say about an open listing is there's more than one broker. Usually it's done on an REO, a bank-owned property. The REO stands for real estate owned. And the bank gives several people. They're all able to sell the property, but the only one that gets paid is the one that actually procures the deal.
REO stands for what?
Real estate owned. The bank took it back, and the bank owns it. Owner nets his proceeds. This is called a net listing. They are legal. There for a while, they really didn't want net listings to be legal because basically what happens is when they first came out with net listings, how it went down was, okay, I'm a seller and I know nothing about real estate, but I know that I owe almost as much on my house as it's worth. So if the real estate agent sells it, I might not be able to pay them a full commission because I might not get enough money to pay off the bank. So I say to the real estate agent, I really want you to sell my property. However, there's not very much room between what I owe and what you can sell it for. And that way the real estate agent can get whatever, it's a net listing, they're going to get a net amount. However, there's another kind of net listing. So there's different types of net listings where maybe the seller needs to do something and they can't do it unless they net out enough money. So like when I talked about it yesterday where the guy said he wanted to buy another property and he needed to get a certain amount out. That's why he listed it too high. So maybe the seller says, you know what? I know my house isn't worth that much, but I have to net out at least 50 grand to go buy this other house. If I net out 50 grand, I'll take that and be happy. Well, the reason they don't like net listings is, let's say the real estate agent knows it's really worth a lot more and the seller's going to net out 100 grand. And so the real estate agent says, well, okay, I'll get you your 50 grand and I'll take the commission of what's ever left. And so then it ends up that they get more money. Does that make sense? The other kind of net listing there is I had this one. This one's more popular and it's worded a little bit better for the test would be you got sued and you owe a certain amount to somebody. And you say, okay, well, I need to sell my property, but I need to net out this much to pay off this lawsuit. So then you go ahead and you pay off that and then the real estate agent gets the rest of their commission. So there's different types of net listings, but this one says the owner nets out his proceeds before the broker gets paid. So I have to get a certain amount before I pay you. So they are still legal and they are still out there. Broker gets paid based on what happens after the listing expires. This is called the protection period clause. So on the listing contract, there's a little section that says protection period. I don't know how many people fill it out. I always put 90 days. So basically that protection period says, okay, in that section, let's say that you have a listing for 6 months and you show it to a bunch of people. When you show homes to people, you're supposed to keep contact information, okay? So let's say that you have 4 people that say, I really love this home. Like we had some people on one of the ones we did that said, we love this property, but we're going on vacation and we don't want to get tied into a purchase contract while we're going to Europe for a couple months. So when we come back, if the house is still available, we'll probably put an offer in, okay? So we have their name and their phone number. Well, let's say that when they come back, the seller is expired or the seller moves on to a different agent. Well, then if the seller moves on to a different agent and I have the name and number of these people and they still want to buy it, I can still take their name and number. If they go and buy it through somebody else, I could say, well, those people were in, we let them in and they signed they signed in our protection period clause that they had seen the house and they were going to buy it if it was still available when they came back. So in that section, you have to have the name. We actually went through this. And so we had to give the attorneys the name of the people that went through the property so that they would know if one of those people bought it, we'd still get our commission. So it's protecting you guys for your commission. Authority for broker to get paid. So the authority to get paid is inside your listing contract. Must be in writing. So if you want to get paid, put it in writing. Remember what happened to the guy with the $900,000 deal? And the next page. False information from the seller. Ooh, that's not good. Well, if the seller lies to you, how do you know they lied? So if the seller gave bad information, inside of our listing contract, there's a thing that's called the hold harmless clause. So they can't sue you. We like that one, right? Hold harmless. Leases. Right of possession for paying rent. I think I mentioned that yesterday also too. My landlord that just walked into her client's home. You're supposed to give them at least 24-hour notice before you just walk on in. Right of possession for paying rent. Sublease or assign. So if somebody's renting a place, let's say that they sign a rental lease and then they sign a 2-year rental lease, and then in 6 months they find out that they meet and fall in love and marry somebody and they want to move out. Well, they can either go to the landlord and say, I want to cancel my lease, or if it's not in the contract that they cannot do it, they can go ahead and rent it out. So let's say that you were renting the property for $1,500 a month, and now you can get $1,800 a month, but you want to move out. If you can sublease it for $1,800 a month, then guess what? You're making an extra $300 a month, right? That's subleasing. As long as it doesn't say in the lease, if lease does not prohibit it. So there for a while, a lot of people were, what they were doing is they were leasing Airbnb properties and subleasing them out. I don't know if they're still doing that. I think Airbnb changed the contract and said you had to own it. Unwritten lease for more than a year.
I'm sorry, so what was the answer on the other one? 49?
If lease does not prohibit it. We're so dangerously close to the end. You got it? All right, unwritten lease for more than a year. Unenforceable. I was going to say stupidity, but I didn't want to be mean. Unenforceable. Who's the lessee? Who's a leasee?
The renter.
The renter. Leasee who didn't sign lease. Implied contract. So technically, check it out. The renter doesn't have to sign the lease. The landlord does. So the leasee doesn't have to sign it, because if you tell somebody the rent is $1,800 a month and they give you a deposit and move in, that's an implied contract because they actually moved in. Does that make sense? I had to go through that with one of my renters. He's like, but I didn't sign the contract then. And I'm like, but you moved in that time. So then you had to prorate it by the date that he moved in. Percentage lease. I like this one. I want it when I grow up. A percentage lease. Let's say that you have a shopping center and you lease it out. You get a percentage of their gross sales. So not only is the person renting from you is paying, like, let's say a flat fee of $4,000 a month, you get a percentage of their gross sales too. And you wonder why stores go out of business and go online, right? Maximum term for an agricultural lease, 51 years.
For the percentage lease, is it one set formula to calculate that, or does it vary by lease?
On the state test is exactly what I just said, and that's all it is, period. On ours, they wanted 4% of our gross lease. So we said, thank you, but no thank you. Tenants pay fixed and variable expenses. On the state exam, so again, somebody's going to think, oh, I know more than you know. That's great if you know more than I do. But, because there's some people that go, oh, that's triple net because they're studying to do commercial. This is not triple net on the test, and you will get it wrong. It's net lease. So if the tenant pays a fixed and variable expenses, it's a net lease. In the real world, it's a triple net. On the test, it's a net. So unfortunately, on the test, it's different than the real world.
So is that what it used to be
What do you mean?
years ago? And
No, absolutely not.
So they
It's just wrong on the test. Because you know what? The test is really for the basic real estate license. They don't think about commercial people. They really don't even care about commercial people because you guys, you have to think about this. Our government wants to protect homeowners with the house over them. They don't care about rich people who own commercial properties. They don't care about rich people who have rental properties. When Governor Newsom said, okay, you don't have to pay your rent, I don't think he took into account all the people that were the small mom and pop people who owned houses, and that was their income. You know, a lot of people think, well, because actually there was a loophole that said if you were a business that was leasing out a property, you couldn't get that money back from your tenant. So there's like so many things you have to know, but just to get past this test is just what we have on this class. So if a landlord does not maintain the property, they're a slumlord in the real world, right? Tenant is released by constructive eviction. So the tenant could get out of their lease. You guys all got that? That's a long one, huh?
constructive eviction.
Constructive eviction. I tried that. It didn't work. You wouldn't leave. I tried everything. That guy wouldn't go. Agreement to terminate the lease early. So if you guys both agree on it, you can cancel out the lease. Surrender. It's called a surrender. Agreement to terminate the lease early. Tenant vacates early. So you go to your property and knock on the door and ask for your rent money and they're gone. I was hoping for that. But he was still there. Abandonment.
Will you answer the door when you go in?
I didn't even go. No, because see, my property has a gate and then a courtyard.
Oh.
So you can't even get to the door. I should take the lock off that gate. I have good renters now. Tenant stays after lease expires. This is called estate at sufferance. So you know how you remember that? After they stay, the landlord's suffering. So they have a lease and they stay over the time. Estate of sufferance. Oh, you guys are going to like this part. Commission. You guys all got your estate of sufferance? Principal cancels before expires. Can they do that? They could owe you 2 commissions. So if your seller cancels before your listing expires and they go and they list with somebody else, they might have to pay you and the new agent. I told you guys I had one lawsuit like that, and that's what I did. I sued my owner for my commission and I got paid. But it sucks when that happens because guess who gets half of your commission? The attorney.
But it's the principle.
And your broker. I didn't have a broker.
But it's the principle behind it.
It's the principle behind it. Yeah, well, I still got some money. Got half of it.
Not to confuse it with that.
If no written agreement, back to the $900,000, no commission agreement, payment of commission is permissible. So if they want to pay you, they can pay you. But if you don't have a written agreement, they don't have to pay a commission. And your broker will be very mad at you. They might make you pay for it. You guys all got that? Okay. No written extension of listing. Check this one out. So you guys are in escrow. You don't get an extension on your listing. Quite possibly you could not get a commission due.
Who's supposed to give you the extension of the listing?
If you're the listing agent, you need to go to your clients and get the extension.
Before you get into escrow.
I would do it before I get into escrow, yes. If it's close, if it's coming close, I always say that if you're gonna expire, I always say 14 days before the expiration, make sure you talk to your seller about extending. And the last one on page 61, purchase of a timeshare interest. It's still on the test as rescind in 7 days. Buyer can think it over and go home, and they have 7 days to back out. Rescind in 7 days. Ooh, this section's long. One more page. We'll reinforce it when we go over the questions and answers. Unilateral contract. Option. So remember when I told you in the 70s, the interest rates were real high, so people did purchase with options to buy. So because the interest rate was so high, people would say, how about if I rent your property for 2 years and I have the option to buy it? When you have that option to buy, the purchase price is frozen as of that time. It's not where they can say, well, in the future, we'll figure out what the cost is. You're picking the amount at the time. So an option. Buyer in an option contract. Is option E not bound to perform? So the buyer in an option contract is the option E. The seller is the option OR. You have to know this. You have to know everything I say. So they're not bound to perform because it's just an option. You're going to sign a purchase, an option with a purchase with an option to buy. It's actually two separate contracts. It's a purchase contract and an option contract. Okay. Seller in the option contract. You know how it goes with the seller. The seller, if the buyer wants to buy, the seller has to sell in an option. So the option OR must sell to the option E. Now, if 2 years go by and the price of the property went down, the option E can go, well, you know what? The property's not worth as much. I don't want to buy it. And they can opt out. But if they don't, the seller has to sell. Option and listing. Now, this is different. This is between the real estate agent and the seller. Let's say that you go door knocking. Like this is what happened to one of the girls that had her license under me. She went door knocking and she knocked on the door and the people opened and she loved their home. She's like, oh my God, I love your home. Are you going to be thinking of selling it pretty soon? And they said, yeah, but you know, so they talked about what they wanted to list it for. And they said they wanted to list it for 1.6. And she said, this is the same girl that didn't want to pay escrow. She goes, well, you know, I could go 1.3, and they're like, but we want 1.6. She goes, how about if I take a listing, and if it doesn't sell, or if you get an offer that's lower than 1.3, I want the option to be able to buy it. So you can take a listing with an option to buy. But if you're going to take that option to buy, and you're buying it to fix it up and sell it, then you have to disclose to the seller that you're going to fix it up and sell it. So as a listing agent, you have to disclose your intent. So disclose all. So have you guys ever heard of a little company called Purple Bricks? You ever see that commercial for Purple Bricks? Did you guys not watch TV? Purple Bricks is the commercial where the two ladies are in the kitchen and she's like, hey, you sold your house. And she goes, yeah, and I use Purple Bricks, so I just paid a flat fee. So a flat fee broker is when you, it says advance fee contract, the broker cannot guarantee a transaction. So what Purple Bricks did is they would go to your home. It actually worked for them in the UK, but it didn't work here in the US. What they would do is they'd say, okay, don't pay $50,000 in commission. Instead of you paying a bunch of money in commission on the percentage of the sale of your house, what we're gonna go ahead and do is we'll sell your house for $4,900 flat fee. That's an advance fee contract. We're selling your house for a flat fee, okay? But you cannot guarantee a transaction because you don't know if you're going to sell it or not. So when Purple Bricks would do that, they'd take the listing, they'd get a check for $4,900. If they sold the house, great. If they didn't sell the house, the seller just paid $4,900 for nothing. So can you see why it did not work in California? Okay. You cannot guarantee the transaction. Submit materials to the commissioner. So if a company is going to do advance fee contracts, they have to submit the materials to the commissioner before they advertise. Not less than 10 days before publication. So make your squiggly line. And go all the way back to your last squiggly line, which is where? What page are you on?
54.
54? That was a long time ago. Here, take this.
Thank you so much.
So there's a little more, we might slow down a little bit because I really want you to absorb this part because it's the part that a lot of people have problems with, okay? Don't yell out the answer, give them time to answer it. Which of the following best represents the 4 legal essentials of a valid contract? You have to have all 4.